Welcome to episode 3 of NostalgicPixel. I'm Brian. In this episode, we're going to be looking at Policenauts for the Sega Saturn. This game just slipped from getting released in the US on the Saturn. While never released outside of Japan, it has been translated by fans over at policenauts.net. This game was originally translated for the PlayStation in 2009 and on the Sega Saturn in 2016. After owning the Saturn version for a few years, I was excited and happy to find out that this game had been translated for the Saturn. Billed originally as the next generation of Snatcher, so let's start there. Snatcher, Kojima's game before Policenauts. This was released originally on the PC 8801 in 1988, followed up shortly on the MSX2 in 1988, then the PC Engine in 1992, Sega CD and Mega CD in 1994, and lastly released on the PlayStation and Saturn in 1996. Sadly, only the Sega CD and Mega CD released in English and have become highly sought after. This point-and-click adventure also has light gun support. Snatcher kind of borrows heavily from Blade Runner, set in a similar setting. You play Gillian Seed, a new recruit to the police task force, Junker. The task is to seek out these artificial life forms known as Snatchers that are murdering and stealing the identity of their victims. This game also has a Metal Gear to assist you. I couldn't talk about Policenauts without mentioning Snatcher. Kojima has said before in interviews that he wanted to be a film director. He worked to make his games more cinematic. That ambition followed him throughout his career. Policenauts first began development during the making of Snatcher. The development team took a break when encountering issues with memory limitations. This genre really made to take advantage of the extra space the CD-ROM format provided at the time. Policenauts was labeled an interactive cinema. These games became a possibility during the time when the industry was moving on to 3D games. Kojima followed up Policenauts with Metal Gear Solid in 1998 that went on to spawn many sequels. Policenauts, originally released on the PC 98 in 1994, 3DO in 95, PlayStation and the Saturn version in 96, the Saturn version of the game is considered by Kojima to be the complete version. It includes more sub-stories, cinematic features at 24 frames per second versus the 15 frames per second on the PlayStation version, also increased frames of animation, and light gun support. The original version on the PC 98 featured pixel art, while this version is fully animated cinematics and CG graphics. This was ambitious and cutting edge at the time. This game for me really ages well. Policenauts' backstory in 2013, Jonathan Ingram was part of the Policenauts, a small group of 5 that oversaw the safety of the space colony beyond Coast. Jonathan had a malfunction with his suit and was jettisoned into space. Jonathan was able to put himself into hibernation, drifting through space. 24 years later, he was found in deep space. Jonathan is a man lost in time. After being lost in space for 24 years, comes back to find the rest of the world has moved on without him. Not being able to slip back into his old life, with his wife married and the Policenauts now being a thing of the past, finds himself in old LA working as a private investigator. This game starts off here, 3 years later, after they're found in space. Jonathan clings to the past wearing his old Policenauts jacket and shows little sign of wanting to let go. This game starts off at his desk where you look around, pick up the pieces of his backstory from clicking on the items around his office. This game goes into great detail on many clickable items throughout the game. Playing the game, I found myself clicking on everything multiple times as it would not always give me the same reaction of text each time. Part of this was my desire to get every ounce of story and also to really take in all the hard work of the translation project that was put into this game. They really handled this with great affection, and it is not simply a translation but also a localization effort. Being that so many things one can click on, I found that Jonathan can be a bit of a pervert, and while this is handled with a light-hearted nature of just being another layer of his personality, I think that if the originally planned Saturn version had released in the US, that much of this would have been removed. The game starts off where Jonathan's ex-wife comes looking for your help and finding her missing husband. As awkward as the encounter is, Jonathan is not ready to quite take on the case just yet. Lorraine gives him a little to go on. She leaves quickly and is killed by an unknown assassin. Jonathan tries to chase him down. After Lorraine's death, Jonathan feels compelled to look into her husband's disappearance. This sets up the game as you're investigating the death of your ex-wife and her missing husband. Jonathan leaves Old LA and heads out to Beyond Coast, the space colony where he'd been the Policenaut and where Lorraine is from. He meets interesting company along the way on the flight. This scene, for me, is a nod to the film 2001 by Stanley Kubrick. Once in Beyond Coast, Jonathan soon meets up with his old partner Ed, who is about ready to retire. This is where the lethal weapon comparison comes into play. He also runs into his other former Policenauts as they have moved on in their careers. The game slowly introduces you to all the players as the story unfolds. Karen Hojo, daughter of Lorraine, with her father missing and her mother dead, she helps Jonathan uncover the truth. She is also a news reporter for BBC. Karen was almost in Metal Gear Solid 2, cut out at the last minute, the script found in the Metal Gear Solid 2 document. She also had a brief cameo in one of the Metal Gear Solid's digital comics. Further and further you go down the rabbit hole, you begin to understand the underlying question this game uncovers. Kojima dives into the question of mankind's journey into space and at what cost it comes on the human body in space over decades. This world seems to want to hide the facts of the effects of long-term exposure in space on humans, also to profit heavily on the treatment of these conditions. Policenauts takes you on a journey that is not straightforward, and there are many twists and turns along the way. Going back and playing this retro game, I can't help but feel a connection to Jonathan and his interest of retro. Jonathan is retro in his own time, constantly being faced with the reality of the times, still clinging on to things in his past in small ways. This game really has cinematic aspirations and has nods to some of his other games, largely Metal Gear. While Snatcher has a Metal Gear in it, this has Meryl, member of Foxhound, from the Metal Gear Solid franchise. This game was Japan's first introduction to it. She was later introduced to audiences outside of Japan for the first time in Metal Gear Solid. Western audiences have seen Policenauts sprinkled in the Metal Gear Solid games. This was the game that we missed out on. Again, thanks to the hard work for the Policenauts fan translation group, we were able to experience this gem. Interesting to see that once these games were less limited by memory, where these games really could stretch out in the storytelling and length, just as the industry was moving away from this genre. While the Saturn version does include the use of a light gun, I sometimes felt it more challenging to have to shoot over and over at the same point in the screen than it was to try to shoot multiple targets all over the screen. The light gun was a nice change up in the gameplay, although you'd be surprised at some points on how challenging it can be. About halfway in, the game changes up the gameplay with a series of minigames to defuse a bomb. The lack of resolution and visibility proved challenging for me. I pushed through it like so many of the shooting scenes to continue the story. This genre is not for everyone. For those who enjoy reading many layers of dialogue and digging into the details of the world around you, this game is for you. While the first few acts are a bit of a slow starter, this really does help set up the world as the back half of the game starts to take off. At other times, this game mostly plays like a visual novel. Kojima is known for his storytelling, complicated plots, and his cinematic approach to gaming. Also, he includes many details in the world he creates. While this was the follow-up to Snatcher, the next game after Policenauts really recreated a genre and a franchise that would see many installments and cement his legacy as game director. This game has been the last in the adventure genre for Kojima. Some hope that Kojima revisits this genre. I would like that, but I can also see how he has taken so much from this into his later games, keeping the cinematic scope and storytelling that has been carried on. Again, I would like to thank the people over at Policenauts.net for translating this game. It has been a real treat to play. Thank you. Well, there you have it. That's a look at Policenauts for the Sega Saturn. I hope you enjoyed this look into the game. There is so much going on in this game that I leave that for you to discover and enjoy. Since this game was never released outside of Japan, it is one we all missed, and it is nice that we can go back now and play it in English. I really enjoyed the light gun scenes in this game. If you're looking to play, set aside a few evenings. Thanks again for watching. Please like and subscribe, share with your friends, leave a comment below of a game you might like me to cover next.